There's a man who was marooned on a deserted island for 5 years, and he was discovered and was getting rescued. And as he got rescued, the rescuers noticed that there were 3 grass huts on this island. And they asked him, what are the 3 grass huts for? What is that all about? And he said, well, the first one is my home, and the second one is my church. And they said, well, what's the third one? He goes, well, that's my old church. Even on a marooned island, nothing is permanent. Nothing is permanent. And so it can feel like, how do we get grounded if nothing is permanent? Where do we put our roots if nothing is permanent? This week I was running, and I mentioned before there's a little detour, and I have to go on this mud trail with these mature trees. But the thing with the mature trees is there's roots everywhere. And so I tripped over one of them. And you know that feeling where you're just, but then you catch yourself at the very end? And I was thinking about the roots, and how roots they give us strength. They don't stay in one place, they move. They are so strong they can push up concrete. But where are our roots? These last 2-3 years have been so challenging for so many of us. We can feel like we're not grounded anymore, like we're not rooted anymore. How do we survive in a world like this? How do we stay grounded when so much is going on? When there's so much fear, there's so much hatred, there's so much divisiveness. How do we stay grounded? How do we stay rooted? And I think what came to me in that question, as I asked myself that question, was you have to stay with your spiritual practices. That's what grounds me. That's where my roots are, in my spiritual practices. And it doesn't matter if it comes from Christianity or Unity or Islam or Buddhism, wherever it comes from, those spiritual practices are what roots us, what helps us grow, which helps us stay balanced in a time of uncertainty, which helps us stay balanced when there's so much change. So hard to do that. It's so important that we have spiritual practices. And so we've been looking at different world religions and how they compare to unity, how they compare specifically to unity's 5 principles. And we're looking for that golden thread that is woven through all the world religions, because we're so much alike, that truth with a capital T runs through all the world religions. And what are those same roots but love and peace and freedom? Those are all religion is rooted in that, in finding meaning in life. And Thich Nhat Hanh says, the Buddhist monk from Vietnam who passed away earlier this year at age 95, said, the difference is in the emphasis. That we're all the same, but the difference is in the emphasis. This week we're going to be talking about Buddhism. Buddhism, there's about 500 million followers. About 7% of the world's population practices Buddhism. And it says the Buddha's final words were, impermanent are all formations. Observe this carefully, constantly. Meaning we all have to do our own work, that everything is always changing, that nothing is permanent, so don't get attached to it. And we have someone here this morning who knows firsthand about that. And I want to bring her up now. Linda Ferris is here to be your service assistant. She's better known as Rachel's mom here in this community, but please welcome Linda.
Okay, I've turned my speaker on. Can everyone hear me? Yes. I'm very, very happy and honored to be with you today. I have my own church, which is the Shambhala Buddhist organization, but I've been coming to Unity with Rachel and Richard and the boys for over 20 years and consider Unity to be our family church. So thank you for inviting me to be here today. Sue already gave my talk, so but I'll give it anyway in my own words. I was going to give you just an overview of my life. I feel like I've been a spiritual seeker my whole life. When I was young, the only path I knew was Christianity, and at age 6, I asked to be baptized because I knew that was some sort of significant rite of passage. But as I got older, I realized there are other religions and other spiritual paths. And through high school and college, I explored a lot of them and went to Catholic and Jewish and Islamic and any Hindu, anything I could find that was spiritual, kind of exploring them all. It was finally in 1970 when I was living my hippie life of chop wood and carry water in a cabin, a very primitive cabin in the mountains in New Mexico. Rachel was 6-month-old baby. And someone came by in their funky old pickup and said, "There's this Tibetan guy over at so-and-so's house." So I went over there to see what that was about and met my first Tibetan teacher. And that was the beginning of, and I feel like through all my searching, then it came and found me. And ever since, which is 52 years now, Tibetan Buddhism has been my particular path. I don't consider it to be a religion, although it gets categorized as such. I consider it a psychology and a philosophy. What I think the Buddha did was to realize the fullest potential and manifestation of the human consciousness, and to understand the nature of existence in this world that we live in, and to teach us how we ourselves could realize that potential and how to cope with living in this material world. He did not say that he could save us or that anything could save us except ourselves. He showed us the path, and then he said, you have to tread the path. You have to find your own awakening within yourself. You have to find that lamp of divinity with your own being. And one of the key principles of Buddhism, which Sue elaborated on beautifully, is impermanence. That absolutely nothing lasts forever, and absolutely everything is constantly in a state of change. Some of that is rapid, and we see it right before our eyes, and some of it is very slow, but nonetheless, it is changing, and it will not last forever. Now, is that good news or bad news? I would say that it's neither. It's just the way it is. It's a fact of life. Now, the problem is that we like some changes and we don't like other changes. That's where we cause our own heartache or suffering. We have a situation or a thing or a place or a person that we like and we want it to stay that way. But it's not going to stay that way. It's going to change, and it's going to change in ways that sometimes are better from our point of view and sometimes are not what we wanted at all. Along with impermanence is unpredictability. I taught this to Rachel her whole life, that anything can happen at any time. And you never know what that's going to be. We think our lives are stable. We think we've got everything in order. We think we've got plans. We think we know how it's going to work out. But it's unpredictable. We never know what's going to happen. I've always known that somehow, consciously, like in my kind of conscious foremost mental awareness. I've always known that. It might be because my father died in an accident when I was 7 years old. Your life can change in an instant. I could drop dead right here on the platform. Thank you. So, a perfect example of that is December 30th with the Marshall Fire. A beautiful Colorado morning, I woke up, the sun is shining, the sky is blue. It was windy, but, we get wind. I had a lovely morning, and then I went up and showered and dressed and came back down, and everything was different. The sky was filled with brown smoke and the wind was howling, and I knew this is bad. This is bad from my point of view. The fact is, something's changing. And it's changing radically, and it's changing fast. And I know that Aria Ward, raise your hand, had the same experience losing her house that day, and I know that others in this community had fire damage, and others had the trauma of evacuation and the fear of loss. So what does that teach us spiritually? It teaches us that we cannot rely on anything external for our happiness. If we do that, if we are just projecting outwards and clutching and clinging to outward circumstances or things or people, at some point we're either going to be mildly disappointed or drastically devastated, because it's going to change. And it could change slowly or it could change fast. So, as Sue said, what can we rely on? What do we do? Where do we turn for our roots, for our grounding, for our stability? We have to turn inward. We have to have a spiritual path of some kind, and there are many, and they're all valid, and they all lead ultimately, I believe, to the same truth, that we have to find our own inner lamp of divinity in our own heart. So that's what I have to say. I'd like to end with reciting the Serenity prayer, and you're welcome to recite it with me. I'm sure you all know it. God, grant me the serenity to accept what I cannot change, the strength to change what I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Thank you, Linda. That was perfect. So, Siddhartha Gautama was born a prince. He was born a prince who knew no suffering, who knew only the best that life had to offer, until he insisted on being outside the gate. And outside the grounds, he saw four things, four signs. He saw someone who was old. He saw someone who was sick. And he saw a corpse. And his driver said, or he asked him, is that going to happen to me too? And he said, yes. And then he saw an ascetic, and he realized that at that moment he needed to leave the palace and go in search of his own way, find his own meaning of life. And he was 29 years old when he left his wife and child in search of some kind of meaning for himself, for life. And after about 7 years, he found himself sitting at a tree, at the foot of a tree, among the roots, foot of a tree. And there he was tempted. He tried many different ways before this, but there he was tempted. He was tempted by all the things the world has to offer. And none of them tempted him enough for him to change his mind, that he was going to sit there until he was enlightened. At 35 years old, he woke up at the base of the tree and realized that everything was connected. And he became the Buddha, meaning the enlightened one. And he spent the next 45 years of his life teaching this, that we can all be enlightened, that we can all see the connection, that we can release suffering when we stop attaching ourselves to everything going our way, to outcomes being a certain way, to our own preferences, to our own opinions. And let go of that, release that. There's a freedom in that. Someone asked him, "Are you a god? Are you a king?" And he said, "No, I'm awake. I'm awake." So Buddhism is got lots of different branches. It's very complicated. It has lots of different 4 of this and 3 of this and 5 of that. And trying to decide what to share with you this morning was a little challenging. But going along with our World Unity and World Religion series that we've been doing, we're looking at the similarities or differences between our 5 principles and these other religions. And so the first principle is, everybody know? We've been going over this a lot. God is. God is. There is one presence, one power in the universe, God. And that's unity's principle. In Buddhism, there is no God. There's no gods. As in Hinduism, Buddha said he was not a god. He didn't want people to worship him. He just wanted to show them the way. Very similar to how we in unity look at Jesus. We don't worship Jesus, but he's our way shower, how to have a spiritual life. So Buddhism doesn't mention a god or gods, but there is a wisdom consciousness. There is a presence. And we get to that presence by emptying ourselves of all attachments. The core doctrine of Buddhism are the 4 noble truths. The first is that there's suffering in the world, and we have to be aware of it. And the suffering, this dukkha, is just part of life. We just have to accept that it's part of life. The second is the suffering is due to clinging to permanence. Having that attachment that things are going to stay the way they are. And they, as Linda so beautifully shared, nothing ever stays the same. We're always changing. The third noble truth is suffering can cease. We can cease the suffering, stop the suffering when we stop clinging, when we release those attachments. And the fourth noble truth is that there's a path to overcoming this, and it's called the Noble Eightfold Path. It's what they say in Buddhism, the middle way. And it's right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. And if you are interested in that, you can look it up, and there's a lot more than I'm going to explain right now. But there's a path to stop the clinging, that middle way. No extremes, but the middle way. The second unity principle is that we have this spark of divinity within us. Now, Buddhism does not talk about a spark of divinity because there are no gods. But Buddhism does have three things that identify existence or a mark of existence. There's impermanence, there's suffering, and there's no self. We get to that no self, of that emptying of self, where we're not attached to anything. Everything is conditioned by what came before it. And so we want to remove those conditions, overcome that endless cycle of conditions. Buddha was interested in the direct experience of this, that we all had to find our own way, find our own lamp within. And by doing that, we can escape. We can have that freedom, the freedom of nirvana. This freedom of the samsara, the constant wheel of birth, death, rebirth, birth, death, rebirth. We can get out of that cycle. And it's for everyone if we follow the path, follow the middle way. Paul John Roach says in Unity and World Religions, this escape or release is termed nirvana, which can be variously translated as blowing out or quenching in the sense of the extinction of the three fires of greed, hatred, and delusion. The extinction of the three fires of greed, hatred, and I just lost it. Delusion. Delusion. Just like Christ consciousness is available to all of us if we're willing to look within. Nirvana is available to all of us. It's available for all of us. The third unity principle is the law of cause and effect. What we think is how we experience our lives. In Buddhism, this is very true. We reap what we sow. Our minds trap us in this endless cycle of karma and rebirth, or we can free ourselves. The direct experience is the way. Not having somebody tell us how to do it. We have to experience it. When we see this, we stop making comparisons. I want to read to you a poem from Zenkin, who's the third patriarch of Zen. Zenkin, I don't know if I'm saying his name right. The great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. When love and hate are both absent, everything becomes clear and undistinguished. Make the smallest distinction, however, and heaven and earth are set infinitely apart. If you wish to see the truth, then hold no opinion for or against anything. To set up what you like against what you dislike is the disease of the mind. When the deep meaning of things is not understood, the mind's essential peace is disturbed to no avail. Do not search for the truth, only cease to cherish opinions. It's the middle way. The middle way. The fourth unity principle is that we use prayer and meditation to align ourselves with our own divine essence. And in Buddhism, meditation is a huge part of life. There are many, many forms of meditation. One of the most ancient is Vipassana. And when I was in a spiritual direction I still am in the spiritual directions program. When I was taking a class on contemplative practices, we did lots of these each week. There are so many. If you are interested in these different types of meditation, just type in meditation in Google. There's tons and tons of meditations. But Vipassana is about mindfulness. It's about mindfulness. It's about watching our thoughts without attachments to them, without judging them. I love how Paul says in the book, everything is grist for the mill. Everything that happens in life can be used. That's where we can start. Something's happened to you don't like, start there. Something's happened to you that you like, start there. Everything can be used as a blessing. Everything can be used as a lesson. Because nothing's permanent anyway. The fifth unity principle is I act. We have to put our feet and hands to knowing these things. Knowing these principles is not enough to just learn them. And in Buddhism, selfless action towards all beings is very important. There's a meditation called Tonglen, and it means giving and receiving. We did this in my spiritual directions program, and I had a hard time with it because at the time I was trying to overcome pneumonia. But what it is you breathe in the suffering of others and pain of others. You breathe it in. And then you breathe out blessings and benevolence. Now, it seems kind of backwards to us sometimes. But think about how you breathe in. They talk about this dark smoke. Breathe in and transform it within yourself, and then breathe out blessings and benevolence. We want kindness for everyone. There's a power within us that is greater than any circumstance that is outside of us. There's a strong emphasis in Buddhism on metta, on loving kindness. The Dalai Lama said that kindness is his religion when asked. And Bill Holmes just said, or sent me an email last night at how he has the words, he had heard that the Dalai Lama said kindness is his religion, and so he put it on his dashboard so he remembers when there are inconsiderate drivers around. And he remembers in everything that he's doing at home, kindness, kindness. On Friday, Kevin and I went to a concert. We went to see the Lumineers at Coors Field, and the Lumineers were great. But before they played, there was another guy playing. His name is Gregory Alan Isakov. Isakov. And he sang a song, and the words kept repeating, and it seemed almost like a mantra to me, and I wrote them down in my phone. I typed them into my phone in my notes because I wanted to remember. And the words were, let's put all these words away. Let's put all these words away. And I looked it up this morning. What did that mean? And it meant that he really likes the silence. The silence, the meditation. But interestingly enough, yesterday, as I was thinking about this song and looked it up, what were those words again? Let's put all the words away. I opened a book by Thich Nhat Hanh, and the book is called Living Buddha, Living Christ. If any of you have read it, it's really good. And I got to this part in the book just by chance, synchronicity, okay, not by chance. And the chapter was called For a Future to Be Possible. And in it, he says we need to reroute to cultivate compassion. And so he talks about the 5 wonderful precepts of Buddhism. The 4th of these is unmindful speech can kill. And I thought, how appropriate that I would flip right to that as I'm thinking about let's put all these words away. He says in the book, I will refrain from uttering words that can cause division or discord, or that cause the family or the community to break. I will make all efforts to reconcile and resolve all conflicts, however small. He rewrote these 5 wonderful precepts for times such as these. For times such as these. Our words matter. What we say matters. And there are so many ways to communicate now, and so many of us are islands, that we're not connecting with each other. We're not really listening to each other or hearing each other or speaking words of love. We need to practice mindfulness in our speech. Don't trip over the tree roots. Be aware, be mindful, keep your balance. Breathe in and recognize what you're feeling. And breathe out a calmness to your feelings. That was one of the Buddha's first meditations. So do you feel grounded? Do you feel rooted right now? And if you don't, what spiritual practices can you use to help yourself with that? There's so many spiritual practices. As we've been talking about unity and world religions, we've mentioned many different spiritual practices from the different world religions. Pick one and try it. What is showing up as grist for the mill in your life right now? What is showing up that you can work with, that you can use as a starting point? Realize it's impermanent. Whatever it is, it's impermanent. It's not going to last. And practice loving kindness. No matter what is showing up in our lives, we can use it to transform. We can use it to empty ourselves of our attachments and experience the freedom of nirvana. Namaste. Peace be with you.